Mearsheimer is one of the world's most distinguished foreign policy intellectuals. He's been a professor of political science at the University of Chicago for decades. His prominent books include The Tragedy of Great Power Politics, that was published in 2001, and The Great Delusion, Liberal Dreams and International Realities, that was published in 2019. John was a guest at CIS back in 2019 when he spoke to sold-out events in both Sydney and Canberra. And last year, in a virtual CIS forum, John debated the prominent former Singaporean diplomat Kishore Mahbubani on the question, has China won? Well, rarely in history has an academic been as intellectually vindicated as our guest. As I wrote in the Australian newspaper in 2020, quote, 2 decades ago, Mearsheimer's bold thesis was that great power rivalry was not over. Like many prophets, Mearsheimer was ignored, but he accurately foresaw the intense Sino-American security competition that the coronavirus crisis has exposed. And with that, it's a great pleasure to welcome Professor John Mearsheimer back to CIS. Hi there, John.
Hello, Tom. I'm glad to be back.
Well, John, in the current edition of Foreign Affairs magazine, that's the November-December 2021 edition, it's titled The Inevitable Rivalry, America, China and the Tragedy of Great Power Politics. You make a provocative thesis. Summarise succinctly your argument.
Basically, the article deals with how the United States dealt with China during the unipolar moment, from the time the Cold War ended up until President Trump took office in January 2017. And my basic argument is that in the last decade of the Cold War, it made eminently good sense for the United States to ally itself with China and to help China grow economically, because that would make China more powerful and it would allow China to be a good ally for purposes of balancing against the Soviet Union. But then when the Cold War ended in 1989, the question on the table was, how should the United States think about dealing with China? And the fact is that China was a very poor country in 1989, but it had a huge population advantage over the United States. And therefore, there was a real danger if we helped China grow economically, given its population advantage, if it became rich, if it became prosperous with all those people, it would be a threat to the United States. In effect, it would be a peer competitor. What happened over the course of the 90s, and really the first 20 years of this new century, is that the United States foolishly pursued a policy of engagement which was designed to make China richer, to make it wealthier. It's very important to understand that we helped China, we, the United States, and of course the Australians, the Japanese, and so forth and so on, went along with us. We made China into a powerful country in East Asia. And China is now at a point where it is determined to dominate all of Asia, to become a regional hegemon. The United States, of course, and the Australians are bent on preventing China from dominating Asia for good strategic reasons. But the end result of all this is that we're effectively in a new Cold War. We have an intense security competition on our hands, and this is a very dangerous competition.
Okay, so succinctly summarise, your argument is that once China grew wealthy as a result of Western engagement, particularly US engagement in the 1990s and the 2000s, that a US-China great power competition was inevitable. And had US policymakers understood the realist logic, your logic, John, of great power conflict in the early 1990s, they would have tried to slow down Chinese growth and maximise the power gap between Beijing and Washington. That's your line, right?
That's exactly right, Tom. And the fact is, as you well know, in the early 1990s, most people thought that realism was dead, or that balance of power politics was dead. Great power war was off the table forever, and that people like me were dinosaurs. So when I made the argument loudly and clearly starting in early 2001 that we were in trouble and we should do what we can to slow down China. Nobody wanted to hear that argument.
Okay, so instead of fostering harmonious relations between China and the US, as the conventional wisdom said it would in the 1990s and 2000s, all engagements done has led to this intense security competition. The question here is, what course then should have been conducted, and how would that have changed where we are now?
Well, it's very important to understand that in 1990, China was a backward country economically. It had 1/75th the per capita GNP of the United States. And per capita GNP is a really good indicator of just how wealthy a country is. So this was a backward country, but it was deeply committed to growing economically, to becoming prosperous. So the question is, what should the United States do? A good realist like me would say that it's obvious that what the United States should do is do everything possible to slow down Chinese economic growth. And here we're talking about the fact that China depended on US markets, US technology, and US capability to grow. And with regard to those markets, we should have gone to great lengths to slow down trade with China, to not give them any special deals, which we did do. We certainly should have not welcomed them into the WTO. And as far as technology is concerned, we should have gone to great lengths to prevent technology transfers to China. And we should have gone to great lengths to limit foreign direct investment in China. And we did none of those things. And in fact, we did the opposite.
And the result is we're now in deep trouble, you say, and there is little we can do to change the situation. Tell us more.
Look, the fact is, Tom, from Beijing's point of view, it makes eminently good sense to want to dominate Asia, just the way the United States dominates the Western Hemisphere. The Chinese have no interest in having the Americans in their backyard any more than we, the United States, have an interest in having China in our backyard. That's why we have the Monroe Doctrine. So once you take a country with that large a population and you make it really wealthy, it is going to have the wherewithal to take efforts or to take measures to try to dominate its region of the world. And of course, the United States is going to try to prevent that. So what we did was we created a situation where China was powerful enough, or is powerful enough, to try to dominate Asia.
You make the point, obviously, that as a result of all this, Washington and Beijing will now wage a very intense security competition that can best be managed on the margins to prevent disaster. We'll get to that later on, but let's test your thesis and go back to the 1990s, John. Of course, this is the time of the end of the Cold War, the collapse of the Soviet Union. Charles Krauthammer coined the unipolar moment to describe an era of US primacy in the international system. Our old friend Frank Fukuyama, the end of history, all of that. And there was a bipartisan consensus, a very strong bipartisan consensus in Washington, in Canberra, indeed most of the West, that believed that we needed to integrate China into the global economy. And this was a view held by liberals as well as conservatives on left and right of the political spectrum. And of course, at the time, this was a tremendous economic opportunity that China presented to the West. The question here is, what did the widespread rejection of everything you've been saying of strategic realism, what did the widespread rejection of realism tell us about Western public discourse during the 1990s and the 2000s?
I think there are 2 points here. The first is, I think that the Frank Fukuyama view of the world won out once the Cold War ended. People in the West believe that the United States and its allies had fought fascism in the first half of the 20th century and defeated it, And then in the second half, we, mainly in the West here, and this would include countries like Japan and Australia as part of the West, I'm using that term loosely, that we had defeated communism. And that what the future held in store was nothing but liberal democracy. As time went by, more and more countries would become liberal democracies. To put it in slightly different terms, we had the wind at our back. And people like me who argued that realism was still alive, great power politics would still matter in the future, were seen as dinosaurs, people who had an outdated view of international politics. So the fact is, Tom, there was absolutely no chance, given how people were thinking at the time, that we could sell an argument that it made sense to slow down Chinese economic growth. And in fact, most people believed that if China grew economically, it would eventually become a liberal democracy. And because liberal democracies don't engage in violations of human rights, and because liberal democracies don't fight each other, once China was a liberal democracy, we would all live happily ever after. This is the story that people told themselves.
Yeah, we told that at CIS. We're a classical liberal think tank. We subscribe to that orthodoxy too. In fact, we were unashamedly championing it.
No, of course, that's true. I think, by the way, that you basically thought my views didn't make a lot of sense in the early 2000s when you first heard them. And I think that was true of most people.
But see, a lot of people listening into this would say, quite rightly, if we followed your approach in the 1990s and the 2000s, what effect would have that had on the economies of the US, Australia, Japan, and other countries that engage heavily with China? That would have hurt us, surely, economically.
Well, first of all, with regard to China, it would have delayed for a long time the point at which China became a great power. Remember, during the Cold War, China was not a great power. We lived in a bipolar world. There were two great powers on the planet, the United States and the Soviet Union. So China was not a great power in 1990. It would have taken much longer than it has for China to become a great power. And furthermore, I believe once it became a great power, let's say that happened in 2025 or 2030, that great power would have been much weaker than the one that we're facing today. So we could have slowed down Chinese economic growth and delayed its achievement of great power status, okay? Now, your point is that the United States and Australia and Japan would have suffered as a result of this. I think there is some truth in that. There is no doubt that we would not be as prosperous today as we are, but we would not have suffered as much as China did. And the relative power gap, which is of enormous importance, the relative power gap would have been much more favorable for the United States, for Australia, and for Japan. And that matters greatly. We would not have created, Tom, a peer competitor.
Yeah. And your argument is that essentially in the 90s and 2000s, we in the West were feeding the beast. I get that. But let's return to 2021 and that beast. You argue in Foreign Affairs magazine, quote, "This Sino-American rivalry will test US policymakers more than the original Cold War did, as China is likely to be a more powerful competitor than the Soviet Union in its prime." That's what you say in Foreign Affairs magazine. But let me put this to you, John. The Soviet Union was physically located in Europe and East Asia and directly adjacent to the Persian Gulf. Thus, the US competed with Moscow in all three regions, okay? However, China is physically located in Asia alone, and there's a long distance from those other two strategically important regions. So the question here is, why do you think this Cold War will test policymakers more than the last Cold War? John Mearsheimer.
Yeah, there's no doubt, Tom, that your description of the Soviet Union is correct. And the United States did have its hands full dealing with the Soviet Union in the sense that it was physically located both in Europe and Asia and adjacent to the Gulf, as you say, and China's not. But that's not the most important dimension of the conflict. What makes the conflict between China and the United States more dangerous than the conflict between the United States and the Soviet Union has to do with where the central focus of the competition was during the first Cold War and where it is during the second Cold War. During the first Cold War, Asia and the Gulf did not matter that much. The focus of US attention was on the central front in Europe. Most of Soviet military power was concentrated in Europe. Most of American military power was concentrated in Europe. That was the focal point. The focal point today is in East Asia, as you said, almost exclusively. And it involves places like Taiwan, the South China Sea, and the East China Sea. And my argument, Tom, is that during the Cold War, it was highly unlikely that we would have a war in Central Europe at that focal point, in large part because both sides had massive armies, massive amounts of tactical air, and were armed to the teeth with nuclear weapons. Therefore, it was difficult, almost impossible, to imagine those two military forces crashing into each other. So the Cold War number one, was dangerous for sure, but it was not that dangerous because the focal point, the central front, would have resulted in a conflict that was so horrible that it was hard to imagine getting it started to begin with. Now, let's move to East Asia today. Very different situation. There's no central front. The points of potential conflict are places like the South China Sea, the East China Sea, where you have these rocks that the Japanese and the Chinese fight over, and then Taiwan. Those are the three focal points in East Asia. Well, it's easy to imagine a war breaking out between the United States and China over those three pieces of real estate, in large part because it would not involve a massive conflict involving large armies and thousands of nuclear weapons. This is why everybody today is talking.
Okay, I hope you got that. So why is it there will be a war, more likely to have a war in this Cold War than a hot war in this Cold War? And I just ask you, just stop there at the right moment. What's the real reason why there will be a conflict? Just talk about interest here. What about interest? Why is it that will lead to a real war? So the Cold War, the first one, the Soviet Union and the US, wow, they say they have two massive armies. But this one, you have three different points, many points involved. And there's no run out of nuclear proliferation. Anyone can tell me? I've not asked the other class yet, so maybe I'll ask you first, this one. Can you hear me? Can I just ask? Okay, there's shipping lanes, natural resources. But why is it there will more likely be a war as compared to the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the US? Why is it the Americans were going harder with this region here on China? Not yet. Think of money. John Mayer Simon said it would be very catastrophic, right, if there was a real war in Europe, right? Because everyone was armed. Yeah, the collateral damage will be so much lesser as compared to the first Cold War. So I would say less costly. Okay, so it's all about interest here. Okay, so what is MAD? Matt, Jiang, can you tell me what is MAD? Oh, mutually assured destruction. Yeah, there isn't such a thing. So the Americans would be very happy if China were to try to take Taiwan, and they got a good reason now we are attacking China. But by the same token, you hear if you are in Singapore, those people that I know in banking sector, a lot of Taiwanese have come to Singapore, and people from Hong Kong also come to Singapore. Okay, so the Taiwanese have also gone to America. So have the Hong Kong people have gone to Canada and Australia, the rich one. So those who are pro-China will stay in China. Those who are not for China will leave China. Okay, so if even if China were to take back Taiwan and Hong Kong, no resistance from Hong Kong anymore. Lesser resistance, I would say. Okay, and if the Americans were really pushing together the Australians, Canadians, and British, it's going to be less costly for them because you don't involve them directly in their own home ground. See, so they are fighting in the sea there. Okay, so uh, that would be the ultimate thing to happen. I'm not too sure what is Chinese they are thinking, but it's very clear cut. John Mearsheimer has actually spelled out why America would go into a war. Okay, so they want to continue to maintain their hegemony, employing their allies, reiterating what I'm saying here. Okay, so a lot of people have been dismissing John Mearsheimer before Donald Trump. So after Donald Trump, then they start to listen to him. All right. So what is liberalism? Just to make sure you have a clearer picture. Some people mix everything up. Okay, the American politics of liberalism is very different from the IPE that we study here. Okay, the liberals in the American Democratic Party, okay, um, they are very different here. They are looking at a way the government can solve the problem. So in recent times, if you've been following the CNBC news, the government now they are trying to pass in Congress or Senate, sorry, the infrastructure bill, the government's ability to solve social problems, infrastructure problem, other social problems. What they're going to remove is that you get 2 years free of college a day, and that's going to be removed. Although education is important, but still they're not going to give free education. They're going to beef up on education, but not give free education. All right. So the liberals that we understand of IPE instead is limited government. Okay, so you must be very clear. And in our course, we are looking at individual rights and personal freedom as one of those domains or factors of liberalism. Okay, but to extend further on the economic side is that the market must have institutions to regulate the market. Okay, no different from the American Democrats, no different from the um, Republicans in America. You have institutions here. Okay, so you have to be very very clear about this. Don't put the Democrats into your IPE liberalism. Very different. And then you just because you call yourself liberals, you believe in the American Democratic Party, or so you put it in your essays. In IPE for liberalism is very different. Okay, so they believe in laissez-faire. Laissez-faire. How did this word or phrase come up? It means let us do, leave us alone. How did it come up? It was all because Adam Smith was the advisor to the House of Commons in the United Kingdom and also advisor to the French bourgeois. Okay, and he just wanted to know what's the government can do for the people, common people. So he went and do survey. He went around. He asked the tradesmen. He asked what they call SMEs. And he asked them, if the government can do something, one thing for you, what would you want them to do for you? So the French and the British tradesmen all said, just leave us alone. So let us do. So that's the concept of laissez-faire, today also known as the invisible hand. Okay. The invisible hands of the government is to leave us alone, not to control us. Our Singapore government has invisible hands of controlling us instead. So they do not believe the government should interfere in the trading system. Okay, so Singapore had a liberal government then before the PAP. The clan associations, mainly Hokkien, the Chinese Hokkiens, were the tycoons, Chinese tycoons. But we also have the Hainanese, the construction business, a lot of them were, I think, the Hakka and Hokkien. But when the government came over, they took everything and collectivized under whatever called EDB, aka Intraco. They created their own government-linked companies there. Okay, so the liberals in IPE believe in free market economy. And if you do ask me, right, Singapore, if you ask me to choose freedom in society or freedom in the market, maybe I should ask you, which one will you choose? You only can choose one, freedom in society or freedom in market as in business. Which one will you choose? Freedom in society, okay. Someone else? Cannot both, huh? Just one. So hard to choose. Okay, so if I say I give a very extreme freedom in society, right, then a lot of chaos. Okay, and whereas freedom in the market, there could be also collapse of banks. That's the extreme. Okay, so which one will you choose? So you rather have crime and all these things, and at the same time, the government control the business. At least, are you saying that? You don't mind that? I'm not saying you want that. Okay, let's put it the other way around. If given a choice, would you have freedom in society first or freedom in the market first? I know everybody will choose society. Okay, because your mind may wired for freedom in society to choose a lot of things, fashion, music, engineering, blah blah blah. And then after that, you will have good jobs. Okay, prosperous first, then have a life. Yeah, I think so. But if you ask me, right, if you really want to test an individual's capacity, how do you test an individual's capacity? Freedom in society or freedom in the market? The individual's capability. That means what you are really capable of doing. Freedom in society or freedom in market? Yeah, I think market freedom comes first. No? Because if you give me a choice now, let's say we do not have NTUC. Okay, we have all kinds of e-commerce platforms to sell food. You will see all kinds of ideas coming up. Free delivery, promo code, all kinds of nonsense. That's how China have all these easy buy and all these things. The government don't really have that easy buy or supermarket that is linked to the Communist Party. Okay, so you ask me, China has more freedom in the market as compared to Singapore. Okay, although they are very protectionistic, but then at the same time they have created a good number of SMEs there. Okay, so freedom in the market is an expression of individual capacity building. And that is very important. Why? Because you develop learning curve. You give confidence to the people. Then comes the freedom in society. Because when you have that capability, you have that prosperity, you tend to be, okay, you have self-interest, but you want the society to be stable because you have money you want to spend, right? You do not want the society out there or the people out there chaotic and then start to rob each other. So if everybody has a place to express their own individual capability. Whether you are a teacher, you are a tradesman, carpenter, you are a fashion designer, okay, you're a musician, you're a cook, okay, you're a painter, you're an artist, whatever you are. You have all those things in place. You definitely will behave yourself really. You won't be like, oh, I got no job now, I'm gonna start killing, raping and all these things. Okay, I'm not saying no zero at all, but chances are very, very low. Okay, so what would you crave for? You will crave for stability. So in order for that to happen, you will behave yourself. Okay, so but if you you believe in society first, right? But then there's no job. Then what happened to the society when it's free, when they got no job? They start to be cranky, Oh, freedom, take drugs, Okay, so if you ask me, right, Singapore, if given a choice, if I were to be the leader, I would give freedom in the market first. Okay, as it is, when that is taken care of, right, the people, you have philanthropy, you have all these things coming up, you have different kinds of skills. And if you have that means, you don't have big players say, oh, we need cheap workers from abroad. Everybody will do it themselves, whether it's a hawker center or whatever, family run business, Okay, so I would take freedom of the market before freedom of society. Okay, but we have never had this. I think the market has become less free compared to before, because every damn thing is NTUC, every damn thing is Temasek. Okay, so the individuals are supposed to be protected, right, by the state. But the problem is, um, when the government becomes too interventionist in the society and the market, right? So the PAP's argument is that they do not want a financial crisis. So they collectivize all the finance companies and commercial banks in Singapore. And now we only have three, and they're all linked to the government, okay, or work closely with the government. So there's no financial um, crisis. But then without that, that thick set of SMEs, um, finance companies and commercial banks, they are small. You also lose out what? Because if you have a thick set of them, you lose out on the competition. So these three banks, right, the usual suspect, UOB, OCBC, and DBS, they have no competition. They will not come up with new financial instruments and to serve the customers. Okay, and at the same time, if you have a lot more banks like that, then you will have more businesses given the opportunity to raise money. Okay, so instead of protecting us, for us, when they say protect, it means they protect your job, and that is the MNC model, which I don't fancy anymore, because we have passed that already. We have really industrialized. What else you want some more? What else you want some more? We ask the MNCs to help us to create what kind of job. Okay, so you look at the job that the MNCs create, they are like artificial intelligence, not much of a job for us now. Okay, so the manpower minister, he's called himself Tan Sealing, oh, I'm from the private sector, we're going to create 1,000 jobs for the defense company, blah, 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 blah. But actually, all these jobs, they will tell you Singaporeans can't do the job. So if Singaporeans can't do the job, can you please tell us, how are you going to free up the market to allow those Singaporeans that can do the job? Okay, so what is it that Singaporeans can do? You open up the market for Singaporeans to do. So easy. That's the job of the state, right? To protect your interests. So, but they're not saying this. They just blame it on you not having the right skill. Right skill for what? For MNCs that to be exploited. Okay? So, on the liberal side, I believe that we should have freedom of the market. It's very important. And so, what I also say is that the state is necessary but also can be despised. Okay? So, it's all because of what? The institutions, right, are run by human agency, right and wrong. So if the institutions are controlled by these people from a single dominant party, they will definitely follow the old model of MNC, because their salary is based on that model. Okay, so if they change model, go to the SMEs, their salaries will not be $1 million anymore. Why? Because the SME formula would tell the minister, hey guys, you are only good at studying. But it doesn't mean you can do business. Why don't you come here and do business? Okay. So the education policy also have to change. So now how to make themselves important is to continue to have that centralized power, centralized management. Okay. So it is right for them, but it is not to our advantage. So you can see Singapore is becoming more polarized. Why? Because MNCs, the jobs that MNCs created, will be lesser for Singaporeans because the skills that we have are not suitable for what the MNCs want at the snap of their finger. Okay? So they had to use foreigners to come here and do the job. Okay? So they didn't prepare us for the new things, but they say we lack the jobs. Okay, so in order for us to have that state, to have that security, that peace and stability, I think you must make sure the people's stomach and the pocket are taken care of. Okay, then we can have a peaceful country. But as it is, I feel that it's very uncertain in Singapore. Even the PAP would admit it. It's very uncertain, very scary. Okay, so a liberal society and a market economy. Wow, paradoxical, very paradoxical. But I would say the first thing that we should look at is a market economy, not Temasek Link at all. Okay, we definitely have Singaporeans that can do the job. Okay, I never, I look at Victoria's Secret, wow, all these fashion designers. What Singaporean cannot do fashion designing? Are you sure or not? Okay, I used to go to pub and listen to people, the musicians that play. They were Singaporean. Today now all Filipino. What happened? Singaporeans stopped playing a musical instrument. Is it? Cannot be. Then Joseph Schooling win gold medal. Oh yeah, that's a Singaporean. But he was never in the system. Okay, the system is driven to tell you that you better score A, PSLE good, then you go to good school, then you get selected for integrated program, then you become scholar, then after that you join, and then you become prime minister. Okay, all this is like, not market freedom at all. So if you have that market freedom, then you have lesser scholars. So the state will spend lesser on all these scholarship. And when you spend lesser on scholarship, you don't see those tiger mums come to Singapore and then, make their children study until vomit, commit suicide or everything. Okay? Because there's no scholarship, so you strive for what? Okay, let them go to another country and go and make their son vomit and commit suicide, but not here, please. Alright. So why I say market freedom is very important, because we need to progress. We need to progress through the market. Okay? So when you have progress in the market there, you have created a learning curve. Okay? So if we were to, in 1984, allow more SMEs to come up and continue to have creative technology. You all know creative technology? You all know creative technology? Can I ask you? Yeah. So creative technology was is a homegrown, but not really homegrown, because it was listed in the NASDAQ in America. Raised money there. He created sound for the computer. So whatever you used to in the 80s when they first started, there wasn't any sound. So he came out with a thing called Sound Blaster. Okay, so he was a very ambitious man. So he went to America, started selling the ideas across. He drove his own van, he slept in a van. And then, like Joseph Schooling and that, he went all over and then he sold his idea. Then he came back. And then he got NASDAQ, he came back. But he still couldn't fit into this place here. Why? Because the system here is about scholars. So if he were to try here, that means Lee Kuan Yew's system was wrong. So you have to look at the agency part. The Lee Kuan Yew needs to look right. So Sim Wong Hoo cannot fit into here because Lee Kuan Yew will look wrong. Okay, it's been institutionalized that you have all the learning curves in the institutions, the stat boards and all, to create a scholastic system. The Public Service Division, which today Chan Chun Sing controls and oversees. They bring in people from the military, or operationalize for digitalization, operationalize for any crisis, operationalize, okay, to make sure that there's security in place. All this is in compliance with international order. rule-based international order. Okay? So there is no space for that creativity. And it makes it even worse for creativity with digitalization because they can use artificial intelligence to see where the resistance will be coming from. Okay? So we don't have any space for progress in terms of individual capacity building. Okay, so individualism, which what the liberals preach, is not in the DNA or the prototype of the institutions that the first and second generation leaders have developed. And Lee Hsien Loong, I think, has more dictatorial tendencies as compared to Lee Kuan Yew, if you ask me. And Lee Kuan Yew is a bit more open. Lee Hsien Loong is like, military. He comes in, everything, just follow by compliance. Oh, so now the people that have died is only 0.2%. Where's the soul? If you tell Lee Kuan Yew, this number of people die, you say, wow, you 0.2. Hey, 0.2 is your number, but I see your people die, 0.2, it doesn't make sense to me. Okay? Still people die. So then that's why he left after he lost Lehman Brothers, because he could have just said, oh, Lehman Brothers I lost, only 0.2% of our reserve, so it's okay, I can continue. He doesn't go by that way. Okay, he go by leadership. So if I lose it, I propose to the people on the ground, or I lose it, I step down. Okay, that's how leaders look at things. So Lee Hsien Loong is not a leader. He's like a person that looks at the system, it is still sustainable, continue with it. Okay, press and press and press and press. So when he say, oh, we will do stabilization for 1 month until October at 24th, then he said, no, not ready yet. Continue based on the system, press 1 more month. Then another press 1 more month. But then he don't look at people's mental health. The system must go on. What about your mental health? Okay, perhaps you must be thinking, if I can survive so many times cancer, you should be able to survive also. Don't worry, just stay at home. Okay, so individualism is not in the DNA of this government here, and that is why they can thrive and continue to sustain their legitimacy. Why? If you're not happy, very easy, just get out of Singapore. New citizen, old citizen, very old citizen, pioneer generation, not happy, get out. Okay, and very good if you get out, because you do not disrupt the system, and then we bring newer citizens into Singapore. Okay, and if you are already SME, you cannot, then maybe you go regional until you're good, then you come back, then maybe Temasek will join venture with you. Okay, so that's the system that we have. It's not even mercantilism. Okay, it's very strange, because economic nationalism have SMEs, right? But we don't have that at all. So when you don't look at the individual, you don't look at, wow, 18 people die, this is very concerning. Okay, I need to do a press conference and say, you know what, we really need to reevaluate the number of, where is it really coming from? Until today, they have not told us how this Delta variant have, created this kind of death rate. They just say, well, it's just 0.25%. So, as I can tell you, those who are unvaccinated are the ones that die. And then the very good news, you know what's the very good news? The vaccinated one, lesser people dying. So you know what you should do? Vaccinated, just vaccinated. But if you die, right, you know what? It's the underlying condition. Okay, so the young people most likely will be protected. So, but when young people die, oh, it's also underlying condition. So everything, they will not look at the individual. But in New Zealand, 58 people have COVID-19. Wow. It's big news to them, Not dead, 58 people have COVID-19. Oh, this is dangerous. So they are more people-centered, Okay? So their progress will be slower. But over time, all these SMEs develop the Silicon Valley in the United States of America. We don't have that in Singapore. Okay? As far as this system is, they just concern which warship come to Sembawang down there. Okay? Then, you know what? We can open up our logistics. We can open up our maintenance, repair, overhaul. We can open up the airport. Okay? So more people will do maintenance. Good. Okay? Singapore not enough worker. Okay, never mind. Bring the Filipinos here. I'll bring the Indians here. It's okay. Okay? So anyway, Singaporeans are all immigrants, right? I don't care. Anyway. Okay? Even my forefathers from China, never mind. I just tell them. Okay? So you never create a culture of enterprise here. because they themselves see themselves as the entrepreneurs here. So there's no market mechanism in that sense. The market mechanism is very sensitive to what the foreign investors want. And the whole institution is to create international investor confidence. Okay, so you have a lot of investors come to Singapore, right? Wow, they will never allow you when you say, you know what, the PAP is like shit. No, they'll say what? The PAP create international investor confidence. Okay, they will not rock the boat. Okay, and then you see got they say we cannot open up the border. 400,000 Malaysians commute between Singapore and Malaysia. Okay, that was in those days. That was an asset, a signal of the international confidence in the government. But that same principle can cause an endemic that is catastrophic. If you let 400,000 people from Malaysia come in and out Singapore, and a lot of them just do not want to declare their status, then how? This pandemic will never end in Singapore. Then you can have actually a lot of people dying there. All right. So these are the things that you need to talk about in liberalism. The most important thing is individualism. Second comes the institution. Okay, and all these would allow individual capacity, the own capability. Okay, and that must be tested in the market there. So if you ask me, like I asked you just now, market freedom comes first. When that happens, then you allow the individual, after a certain amount of accumulated wealth, they will go for the lifestyle. The institution are there to support, okay, to monitor and regulate to ensure everything is stable, okay. And although they say liberals do not want market intervention, the liberals at the outset say that the military and strategic sectors should be under the state to develop to begin with. Okay? And in doing so, when you have the market mechanism to allow competition locally among the people, and then you will have progress in history. Okay? What's that progress in history? Just look at Silicon Valley. Every year, new things come out of Silicon Valley. Okay? So you look at developing countries, they do not have all these, a lot of these problems. If individuals are too good, then you have the dictator clamp them down or buy their idea and keep them aside. Okay, so what happens here? When there are individuals that are capable and they cannot progress in their own country, what happens? Can I ask you? When they cannot get what they want in their own country, what do? Yeah, resentment. So, but if they are capable, what would they do? Migrate. Okay, so there's this phenomenon called brain drain effect. So America creating that conducive environment of market mechanism, okay, would draw the best talent from around the world and to beef up the capability of Silicon Valley. Yeah. And that will contribute to the productive power of America. So if you do not have that and conducive environment, don't waste time. So Singapore say we want to draw the best talent for what when you don't have the conducive environment. Okay, look at the American model. They have a conducive environment. They don't just say, oh, everything must be through the legislation created. Then after that, oh, the state boards will regulate, and then most of the time will be Temasek government. Okay, you don't have that in America. Okay, when you create the software called Microsoft, okay, you didn't have that. So how did it happen? Okay, it was a military software, and in America, the defense, anything that is from the defense, from the army, is a public good. Okay, so the army cannot patent it because it's an institution on its own, right? So what Microsoft, Bill Gates bought it through a venture capital firm of the government, and then he patented it. He transformed it to be more convenient. Okay, Word and all these things, and then it became a hit. But it worked closely with the government to ensure that the whole operating system in America, the office system, okay, you can have this transfer of this document. Okay, everything synchronized. The same for internet. Internet was a military software, a military technology. Okay, then they sold it. They sold it. The American military government, the military does not own it. So I don't know who they sold it. Then eventually, now is widely used. Okay, so we must have this kind of market freedom in order to see the real talent. You cannot just say, oh, based on what MNC wants, then is talent or no talent. That's not the real capability of the person here. Okay, so given a choice, that's why you see the the young in Singapore, they always feel stifled because they have a capability that's never been accepted. Okay, in any case, we used to have tailors across Singapore. Today, no more tailor. Where's the tailor? No tailor at all. Okay, we used to have a lot of tradesmen in Singapore. Or they say, no lah, now China can make cheaper. Why should I buy from you? Okay, so you do not appreciate the individual. So this is the problem that we have here. We do not focus on individuals. All right. So the only time they focus on individuals, you know when? When's the time that the government focus on individuals? Can you tell me when? Yeah, general election. That's the time they focus on individuals. And they focus the individuals within the elite. That's it. Okay? So they have the minimum wage for themselves. But the general public, oh, progressive wage model. So if you tell them, why don't you lower your wage? Oh, then we have mediocre people. Okay? So when you bring in the people who are talent for who are foreigners, they bring in low wage. Are they not mediocre? Definitely, right? So this argument only applies to them only. Alright, so I let you go and read that. I do not want to go through this, but I want to tell you one thing. Why is it that, where is this one? You have all these ideas. These all came from Margaret Thatcher. She was a liberal, okay, although she was from the Conservative Party. There is no such thing as society. There are individual men and women and there are families. No government can do anything except through people. People must look to themselves first. Similarly, Lee Kuan Yew put it very more succinct. No one owes you a living. Take care of your own family. Okay? So in that sense, he is one. Ask you to take care of yourself. But at the same time, his oxymoron, the government wants to control everything. How to take care of yourself when the government is intervening in every part of society and business. Okay? So for them, right, to put the money where the mouth is, right, open up the market for the people. And if young people have that opportunity and they come up. Okay, I will tell you for sure the infrastructure here also good. I don't see them want to immigrate all the time. It's because they have no choice than to immigrate. Okay, so should not have any constraint on the ability of the individual to act in their own interest. Interest in especially the market there. Okay, don't pretend, wow, we got this to give you work fair, all this. This is rubbish. You let them go and do it themselves. Okay, and everything is like SOP. Okay, the way they study also 10 year series, go to school also must tuition. There is no entrepreneur spirit in Singaporeans at all because they are only concerned in the system. Okay, so the person, the military, go to MOE. What the hell he knows about education? Where the hell he know about education? Has he been a teacher before or not? Never, right? So that's very difficult here. Okay, so be wary of the state because the state has agency involved in it. They have their interest there. So the elite will have policies to protect the system as in Singapore. Okay, back in Malaysia, you look at Malaysia, the same here. Now UMNO is going to come up strong. Malacca is going to have an election. And if UMNO comes up strong and win, okay, then you see the institutions back again, human agency again. Then they're going to have Bumi Putra 2.0, Malay capitalism. Okay, is that going to have individual capacity building? I think compared to Singapore, Malaysia has more SMEs. Okay, so Singapore totally look at the number of SMEs, really. The SMEs they talk about are hawker stores and all this. I'm talking about SMEs in technology, SMEs that do software, okay, SMEs that come up with something that is contributing to productive power, right? No. By Malaysia, right, you have SMEs, even in Indonesia, SMEs that contribute to the agriculture sector. They have rubber, they have gloves, and all these things here. But we don't have all those things there. Then the government say our economy too small. The economy is not too small. The economy can expand. Okay. So what I'm arguing for is what they promised actually. What is it that Goh Chok Tong promised? We will have Swiss standard. Okay. So Switzerland have a lot of SMEs, market freedom. Okay. Then slowly it will permeate into political freedom. I think that's what we really should have. But unfortunately, Goh Chok Tong stepped down. Lee Hsien Loong said, no. Now we will have everything run by Temasek here. Okay. Um, so these are all you can go and read. I've explained all in that lecture that I've given to you. So specialization is for growth, but it is something that you also have to consider in politics here. Okay, the role of government in defense also, you must know. Where is it? Evolution. Okay. So the person who started liberalism, okay, is actually was actually John Locke. Okay, so he was a mercantilist liberal. So by the same token, why is he like oxymoron, mercantilist and liberal? So he was in between. He looks at the world in a very unique manner. He looks at the world from the lens of moral hazard. Okay, if you have too much government intervention, no market freedom is a moral hazard. But you have too much market freedom, then the government don't provide the public goods. Okay, the underemployment of the people is also a moral hazard. Okay, so that's why your IR course they use John Locke as the starting point. Okay, LSE uses John Locke as a starting point here. Okay, now you can go and read Locksmith or everything you can go and read. Ricardo. Okay, Hayek and Keynes, I don't think so. You need to do so much of that. Okay, I think we are left with 25 minutes. I want to look at one question. Evaluate the proposition that global economic integration promotes peace and international stability. How would you write your answer? Can I ask? I give you 10 minutes. So at 6:15, I will see what you type out. Okay? If you have any question, please type out on the chat. See you in 6:15, 10 minutes. Okay, next person, Gabriel. I posit that global economic integration can promote peace and stability if we take the liberalist view. This is because the interdependence of state increases the reliance that they have on each other, making cooperation the preferred choice, removing suspicion among them. However, I also opine that it may not lead to peace and stability if using mercantilist lens, because states are ultimately self-helping and survival focused, and they do not trust other states. Even with global economic integration, it will only lead to, you're going to continue typing. So I just want to test you how you would, approach essays, because I want you to open up your discussion. That's very important. How you open up the discussion is very important, because you need those arguments for yourself. So I saw a lot of people getting A for IPE. Surprisingly, I think it's because of all these Q&A. Can I just ask, this Q&A, is it very useful for you to have a better grasp of the topics? Hello? Are the Q&A useful? Bumping this in case you miss it, Prof. Oh, you typed something also. Okay, let me check that. Sorry. Okay, according to the liberal school of thought, global economic integration does promote peace and international stability. The principles of liberalism, such as free trade, market forces, and individualism, do promote an environment where peace and stability can be built upon. Interdependence and the harmony of interest can also be used to examine and explain how peace and stability can develop. Mr. Cobain's peace to trade way of thinking highlights how peace and stability can be developed. However, institutions that have developed through global economic integration disproportionately enrich developed countries, which fails to take into account the inequality perpetuated. Additionally, the rise of conflicting ideologies like fascism and communism also challenge the peace and international stability with underlying populist sentiment. Okay, so Jaro, you should say that you should use the next thing you can say in this essay. I will further elaborate on liberalism, but through the lens of Marxism, you study capitalism in a manner that the liberals have developed to explain the limitations of peace through trade. Okay, Gerald? And that mercantilism is a signal of that limitation, the rise of mercantilism, and the rise of fascism, the rise of communism in the interwar years. In this essay, I'm going to use the theory of peace through trade to explain how global economic integration promotes international peace and stability, with an increased interdependence between trading partners. Like what Ricardo proposed, countries can benefit from specializing in trade and focus their production on areas which they have an absolute advantage. Ricardo is comparative advantage. In this case, trade becomes a positive sum game for all involved, as they can get the same amount of goods and with lesser raw materials. However, states are all concerned with the self-interest. At some point in time when states continue in free trade, there is going to be a shift from liberalism to neo-mercantilism, when states engage in more protectionist measures based on defensive theory, and this also marks the start of the breakdown of international stability. Okay, so Yong Seng, you need to say that you need to state that, okay, and after this all you have written, right, that in this essay I will further explain liberalism in creating the interdependence and using a mercantilist view, okay, the world state system, and also look at what is it called? What you have there? Neo-Marxism, is it? I'm just trying. Oh, the dependency theory. Okay, that the let up to dependency theory is due to the limitation of the liberals in trying to create interdependence. Mine, was it answering the, was it off like the theorist? You can, it's not off, but then you need to inform the examiner, the marker at the start of, at the end of this paragraph that you have created, the schools that you're going to employ. Then, because you have a few ideas there, right? But then you want to narrow your discussion so that he can focus when he's marking. Okay, so you usually have two schools there. So I wouldn't say that you are off, but you can use those theories. Do not use it at the start. You can use it in the middle. And then it will actually help you more than to just start off and say this is whoever who wants John Mearsheimer or whatever. Leave it in the middle there when you are explaining further. Okay? So the starting, don't quote anyone, but your views of why you think there's a limitation in terms of economic integration that promote peace and international stability. Okay? Gabriel? Okay, so GL say can't speak for the rest. I think it helps in the sense that when I'm forced to think on my feet, we don't really know which direction to go because there isn't the same structure given to us. Yeah, I just want to test you on how you push yourself when you're listening to what I say in a lecture, and then how you have really registered and then you come out when I say. Okay? How about Shi Jie? Seng Shi Jie. Yeah, I ask you, you're not asking for answer now. Do you find it useful, the Q&A? You have a feel of the exam? And Prem, Nicholas, Nazri, Niha, Marcella, what do you think? You have this Q&A, is it useful for you? Because I can tell you many stories, right? Then you go to the exam, you still do not know what to write. That's my biggest fear. So when I set out to do IPE, I have 20 lectures and there are 10 topics are divided by 2. So in between, I must think of the exam questions. So I cannot be telling you everything reality. Then after the exam come out, all the reality all go wrong. Okay. What is this? Can have the option for written assignment as well. Yeah, you're gonna have it soon. Once we are done with Marxism, okay, moving into the financial system and the trading system, I will start giving you assignments. So now you must have a feel of it first, what to expect. Okay, so when it's assignment time, please do not be afraid to write, because if you're afraid to write, then it's very difficult for me to gauge or how to help you from there. So I need to know your baseline after I've discussed all these things with you, where you stand, and you have somewhat got an idea, but you need to move ahead and look at how you can ace this. Okay, so last year, if I'm not wrong, quite a number of people, about 10% of the people, the cohort got A, which is quite a huge amount of people for me. B's and A's, I think 20% got B, so 60 something. Okay, of course there are people who fail as usual, but it has been for me it was all online, so I think it's quite a good score for me. And I'm not sure who scored the best in the world and all this, I don't know. But I do know that this method has somewhat helped a good number of people. But I've never seen this person before. Clarissa, is it? Are you coping well? Why nobody answered my question? Yeah. So the more you write, the easier for me to help you. Please don't take it like, oh, this guy trying to get personal with me. I don't know why some students they are like that. That's not my nature. Prof, may I ask, for SCOS, do we generally write out essay in two schools of thoughts and compare and contrast, or all three schools of thought? At most is two. Okay, but unless some questions is like very specific topic based, like hegemonic stability theory. Okay, then you by the time you write everything, you got no time for Marxism. You have to look at the question. But some questions like this one, they give you the option, right, that you promote peace and international stability itself. It's an opening for you to, also say, however. So the British way of writing essays, right, you say, yeah, this is good. However, then you bring in mercantilism or you bring in Marxism. Okay, got it, Alice? So what he wants from you is that you are able to employ the three schools, and there's a counter argument to each school. Can do not write like the economist got all these statistics and how many percentage, how was the growth rate. All this is not what he's interested. You have to write according to the school's thought. Yeah, one to criticize. So when they say, oh, this one is like liberal, right? Liberalism, right? But you use integration as the starting point to develop your essay. Then the counter argument is that interdependence can break down also. And then you bring in all those historical facts and current affairs to to dispute what the liberals claim in that sense. So when you look at mercantilism, okay, and they say that economic nationalism is good, 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 but also you can use Marxism and you say they are the elite, the bourgeois that control, take care of themselves. In the end, it will still lead to an economic crisis because it's all based on interest. Defining terms, you don't need to define terms at all. You just apply the terms, like what in a paragraph you have liberals talking about individual capacity building, market mechanism, institution, and then progress in history. And these are all should be stringed together in a paragraph, the keywords here. So you don't say, oh, liberals believe in this, that, or no. So when you bring peace and international stability, right, then you can also, when you talk about liberalism, okay, global economic integration, it can help a society to develop individually based on institution. So everything will be rule based, okay, and the institution should be centering on individualism. Okay, then the individualism, that they will have competition in market mechanism. That in that competition you allow progress in history. So if every country have the sort of arrangement, okay, you have differences in each country, in across the world, and they will specialize. The world will be a better place. Got it, Gabriel? So you gotta use those tenets of liberalism when you are on a global scale. You have interdependence. In the local, the domestic economy, you have that interdependence. There is rule-based order. Okay, the rule-based order will have all these institutions in every economy that they follow that will center on individuals. Okay, so may the best man win, because it's going to be based on market principles there. Okay, so if every country are engaged in that kind of competition, okay, you don't need to immigrate, right? You just have to be in that country in itself, and your country will specialize in what it's supposed to specialize in. That's a very theoretical way of looking at liberalism, the idealistic way. So then you can criticize because it's so idealistic, right? Then I'm not telling you a fiction like that. So that's how you bring in mercantilists and say, come on, the world is anarchy. So you know what? People fight for their survival. So don't bullshit, okay? I tell you, there's no peace, there's no stability. There's only thing called interest. So what do? The state should intervene. Got it, guys? So if the question gives you is liberal, your construct of the essay at the start, okay, the start you will say liberalism, then you counter argue with mercantilism. So you say I'll use liberalism and mercantilism. Then the body of analysis, the construct of the essay is going to be liberalism, and then you go and use along the way mercantilism to criticize every fact. So when you say individualism, there isn't such a thing as individualism. Okay, why? It cannot work. It cannot work. Why it cannot work? You need the state, right? But why individualism will not work? You have to argue your case. Okay, and then after that, you will go to the next one, market mechanism. How can you open up for market? Because when you're not ready, you still need the state. Okay, so you just go point by point, you argue your case. Yeah, I will put up the recording soon, Alice. All right, guys. I see you next week. So next week we're still online. Ciao. Alice, if you don't see it, please can you email me and tell me that you didn't receive, you still don't see it on eGlobal? Ciao.